In breaking news this Labor Day Monday, federal judges are working overtime into the wee hours on Sunday night and into Monday about a new abuse of power and violation of due process rights by the Trump administration. This time, his attempts in the early wee hours of the morning, under cover of darkness, to throw 600 unaccompanied children ages 10 to 17 on planes and send them back to Guatemala, violating their participation in a refugee resettlement program. Get that. They were refugees to be resettled, and Trump took away their participation in the program, tried to, and took away their due process rights, meaning they never got to be heard before a judge until immigration rights groups found out about it, and the children alerted them. And it led to an emergency filing at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning. The case got assigned to Sparkle Sooknanan. You're going to love her background, a Biden-appointed judge in D.C., who immediately issued a series of 9 separate orders over the course of the next 10 hours against the Trump administration to ground those planes and turn them back around. I'll update you on what happened in this breaking story on Monday morning, Labor Day Monday, here on Legal AF. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute, hit that free subscribe button. This is the kind of content that I think you want and you need at this moment. How'd we get here? Once again, the Trump administration violating the due process rights of immigrants, believing that they don't have any, especially apparently children. They think they're doing such the right thing that they do it in the middle of the night, hoping nobody will catch them. Didn't work this time. The immigration rights group rushed into action, prepared their complaint. They must have these complaints in drafts, just sitting on their computer, and they'll fill in the names later. They know the Trump administration. I'm sure there's a standard complaint and a standard temporary restraining order template that they're using. And I don't blame them. You have to, because you got to move within hours, probably within 90 minutes of getting their notice. They filed this case electronically with the federal court. Now, Sparkle Sooknanan is Donald Trump's nightmare. And that's a good thing. Sparkle is amazing, accomplished lawyer. She actually was in the Department of Justice through 2025 for the Biden administration at the upper echelon. She was one of the leaders of the Civil Rights Division, which has now been effectively canceled by the Trump administration. She was a top flight appellate lawyer for the Department of Justice. And she herself is an immigrant, having come from Trinidad and Tobago with her family, graduated with honors, did federal clerkships, all the way up to being a clerk for Justice Sotomayor. This is not a judge you want to F with, I guess is the thing that I'm saying. And even though she's a relatively young or new judge, she is putting the screws to the Trump administration. She initially, and I'll read to you from some of the filings, she initially entered an order almost immediately, setting the hearing for 3 o'clock on Sunday. I'm talking about Labor Day Sunday. When she found out from the lawyers that the kids were already on the planes being deported, being removed, she moved the hearing up from 3 o'clock to 12:30, and she entered a temporary restraining order that grounded the planes on both the original group of 6 or 7 plaintiffs and then the class, because the class here is defined at everybody that was loaded on the planes who are part of the refugee resettlement program, who are loaded on the planes at 1 o'clock in the morning, or 600 of them are part of this class. She grounded the planes for them, said they don't go anywhere for 14 days, and then ordered the Trump administration to give status reports all along the way about the kids and how they're getting deplaned or not. And when she didn't like the first 3 status reports, she ordered a 4th one, even through the wee hours of last night, Sunday night, to be provided to her. Now, let me read to you from some of what I'm talking about. And I will post this all on the Legal AF Substack so you can do the reading for yourself. It starts with the complaint that's filed. So here is, let me just give you some of the language. I'm going to pull it up directly. Let me give you some of the language of the complaint that's filed. So the suit, class action for injunctive and declaratory judgment relief. Let me frame it so you know exactly what we are talking about here. Okay? Here we go. This is an emergency complaint accompanied by a request for temporary restraining order on behalf of hundreds of Guatemalan children at imminent risk of unlawful removal from the U.S. Plaintiffs, that's the plaintiffs group, are 10 unaccompanied minors from Guatemala between the ages of 10 and 17. that have been removed from the United States in clear violation of the protections of Congress that is provided to them as vulnerable children. Plaintiffs have active proceedings before immigration courts across the country, yet defendants plan to remove them in violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. So they're effectively, the government is violating the Trafficking of Victims Act. Recognizing their unique vulnerability, the complaint continues, Congress has created a special statutory scheme to ensure that unaccompanied minors receive enhanced protection and care whenever the government seeks to remove them. They can't be summarily removed. That violates their statutory scheme and their constitutional rights to due process. And then they filed this particular case. Now, from there, you've got the judge who leaps into action and starts entering her orders. And the first thing she says is, I grant the temporary restraining order, at least for now, subject to a hearing that she's going to be conducting in about 14 days. Nobody go anywhere. But when she gets information that they're already being deported, she calls a hearing. At the hearing, Drew Ensign, who's a lawyer for the Department of Justice, who has been accused of lying to federal judges about immigration removal and planes, including Abrego Garcia and the 200 men who were kidnapped in the middle of the night, put on planes, and sent to El Salvador to be tortured. He has the balls, the brass ones, to tell Judge Sooknanan that Trump administration is all about family reunification. They're just reunifying the 600 because all the parents want them back. Well, let me get this straight. These children were sent here, vulnerable children who were sent here, 600 of them, from Guatemala. They weren't sent to Disney. This isn't a visit to Disney World. This is to get them out of some plight, some terrible set of affairs in their home country, being separated by their parents. We had a very similar thing. For those that are watching in my home city right now, Miami, we had a very similar thing in Cuba in the 1960s when it was called the Peter Pan or Pedro Pan movement, where children unaccompanied were put on planes and sent for a better life away from the communist dictatorship of Cuba. So for those people that are Trump supporters, this is going on right now in Guatemala. And Lord knows what the Trump administration, what unholy bargain they promised Guatemala. I'm sure it's some sort of lowering of their tariffs in order to get them to participate in revoking the refugee resettlement status of these 600 minors. You know who's going to get to the bottom of it? Judge Sooknanan. And she's not having it. I mean, I looked at the docket, the electronic docket. She entered 9 orders in one day against the Trump administration. And every time they would say anything, because she doesn't believe them, she would say, that's not good enough. File another status report. You know, Drew Ensign would file a status report. Oh, 15 children are back in America, and 6 are going to be back in an hour, and 3 are going to be back in 2 hours. She's like, yeah, file another status report. And then he filed another status report. She said, yeah, file another status report. Till she gets all these kids home. Now, I think it's interesting that the Trump administration is either kind of running out of steam a little bit on losing when it comes to immigration, or they're picking their battles. Because on Abrego Garcia, they are going all in on a losing hand, right? They're trying to pulverize this guy out of existence, bringing the full weight of the Department of Justice and FBI so bad, bashing him so bad that his lawyers have had to file a motion to gag the Trump administration, Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, and the rest about prejudicing and trying to convict him in the court of public opinion. But here, they're getting the kids off the plane. They didn't get the kids off the plane they sent to El Salvador, who were tortured upon arrival. But, you know, they're on a losing streak on due process when it comes to migrants. They may have won the right to do certain things, but at the very bottom, and I mean the bottom, even the MAGA right wing of the Supreme Court wants due process. Due process, Fifth Amendment due process, just to kind of, you know, we use a shorthand term for it, but let me explain it simply to our audience. It means that you have the right before some privilege or right or property interest or your participation in a program or a license you've been given or a status that you've been given, or before you leave the country, you have the right to argue in an adversarial process represented by counsel with evidence before some tribunal. Could be an Article 3 federal district court judge, could be a administrative law judge in the immigration world, but you get before a judge to prove your case, and only on findings and along a statutory scheme, regardless of what your immigration status is. Whether you're here on temporary protective status, or you're here under the refugee status, or you're here under asylum, these kids are in a program. They were in an immigration court process when they had it revoked and got dumped onto planes without due process. And that's what we're here arguing for on Legal AF. Due process. I don't know the individual circumstances of these kids, but they're kids. What could they possibly have done? It's not an enemy invasion of children from Guatemala who are, is that what it is? They're the young army of Guatemala. Whatever their particular circumstances are, if they're entitled to refugee status, Congress created a body of law, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, which governs how people obtain status, lose their status, get different status, get asylum, get refugee status. It's all there, and it needs to be complied with, including up to due process. So I'm not here to advocate for any one child. I'm not here advocating for Abrego Garcia. I have my doubts about the evidence against him, but I'm not his defense lawyer. But I will argue till my last dying breath for the person's right in this country not to have a bag placed over their head, thrown in the back of a van or a train or a plane, and taken out of this country without due process, because I don't want to live in that country. That's not the country that is America. And we can't allow Donald Trump to take that away from us. We just can't. And so we're arguing for process here and rule of law here on Legal AF, not any one child, although the whole thing stinks, right? We'll continue to follow it. The new developments with Judge Sooknanan. We got the right judge. We got the right lawyers on the plaintiff's side. We got the right plaintiffs. I mean, who could be more, no, appealing's not the right word. Who could be more vulnerable and more innocent as plaintiffs than these 600 minor children unaccompanied on a plane? And frankly, we've got the right lawyer on the other side for the Department of Justice, meaning he's a loser and a liar named Drew Ensign and the rest of the Department of Justice. And so put all that together, and we should be getting some great results out of Judge Sooknanan, which we will cover here on Legal AF on this Monday and throughout Monday and Tuesday in a fast-moving story. Moving so fast, there's a couple of ways to follow it. If you like what we're doing here on Legal AF, hit the subscribe button. Legal AF Substack Live is where I'm pulling people together, and I'm getting 2,000-3,000 people at a time to talk about issues as they come up. It takes me a minute to do a video over here and it's, of course, longer. I can get more involved. I can read you to more things, but I can pull you together for an instant moment to tell you what's going on in the Trump administration in constitutional law in a way I can't do here. So come over to Legal AF Substack. You hit the subscribe button. If you can swing it, paid subscribe is great. I post all the filings, all the orders. Everything is posted on Legal AF Substack. So join that community as well. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.